Well, hello, friends, and welcome back to Late Night Coffee Talk. It is that time where we do the thing that we do every single solitary week, and I'm glad for it. Look, I got my coffee, and I'm ready to rock. Oh, by the way, it's apparently it's Casual Thursday, right? Because I'm wearing a T-shirt. Some of you may be surprised. I do own T-shirts that are not specifically designed to go under like button-down dress shirts, right? But I have them. I'll tell you more about why I'm doing that here in just a bit. But look, let's get the business over with. For those of you joining us for the first time, I'm Daniel Miller, president of the Texas Nationalist movement, and this is Late Night Coffee Talk. This is that time in the middle of the week where I take a break from working on Texas independence, pour yet another cup of coffee, and fire up the camera, the microphone. I take your questions, talk about what's going on, and generally your questions are what drive what we talk about over the next hour. So I'm going to tell you how you can submit your questions and, keep them about Texit or the TNM or politics. I mean, honestly, you can kind of ask me anything, right? I answer a lot. And not everything is over the target on Texit or the TNM or Texas politics. You guys have been asking a lot of personal questions lately, which is I find interesting. I don't know what the motivation for that is, but we'll figure it out. Anyway, here's what you got to do. First and foremost, because it's on the screen right now, I'll start there. You can email your questions to coffeetalk@thetnm.org. Yeah, there it is. Actually, I don't know. It's down there somewhere. You'll see it. These things are out of sync, so I don't know. Anyway, coffeetalk@thetnm.org. Additionally, if you're watching on YouTube, you can drop your questions in the chat. And of course, while you're there, like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. And we'll talk about that in a minute too, because I want to get back to YouTube because things are happening over there, and I think it's quite interesting as well. But you can drop your questions in the chat. Also, you can drop a super chat as well. If you're watching on X, just comment on in the chat on the video. If you're watching on Facebook, drop your question in the comments on the video, and we'll get those. They all aggregate over here. If you're watching on Rumble or one of the other places, it's not synced. So thank you for watching, but you got to be on one of those platforms to participate in the chat or send your questions. And of course, you can always email. Let me talk about YouTube real quick. So last week, last few weeks, we talked about the introduction of channel memberships on our YouTube channel, so you can help support additional creation of content. And I got to say, you guys have really been coming through on that. Of course, we'll be thanking all of those channel members that have become members. I mean, you guys saw I wish I still had the thing from last week, but a bunch of you have piled on because you said you want more content like this. And I have been asked again, they heard about it. They said they want to do it, but they don't know how because some people don't, right? So here's how you subscribe, right? You're on our YouTube channel. There's the subscribe. Make sure you hit that notification bell, do the drop down and hit all. But right there, you'll see, if you're on our channel, you can see where it says see perks. Well, that's because I'm a member, right? I'm already a channel member, but you should, if you're not one, you can go ahead and click that button and become one. And then last week we had, for the first time, we had someone essentially gift channel memberships to people. That was Ron Raffoon. And Ron, thank you so much for doing that. That was super great. I mean, I'd been a recipient of one of those before, but had never actually seen it done. So there you go. So some of you are recipients of Ron's graciousness. And so if you'd like to do that, please know that is what is helping us continue to make and generate content. We got a lot of great stuff on the horizon coming for you. All right. So before I start getting to the questions, because we've had a lot, you guys submitted a bunch by email, and I'm sure there's some in chat already. But let me explain this. So some of you may be familiar with the TNM store, right? Or as it's called now, the Texian store, where you can get all your TNM merch and things of that nature. But we added this shirt to the Texian store, and somebody complained about it. They're like, that's just That's just rude. You can't say stuff like that low information voters kill republics. I mean, it's something that we effectively say on here a lot. You want to have an independent republic, you got to get informed, and the alternative is a bunch of low information voters effectively killing the republic. And so, in honor of the person who sent in the complaint, I decided tonight to trade out the button-down dress shirt for this, to essentially say, tough. This is truth, and we're not going to be suppressed when it comes to telling the truth. If you want to kill a republic dead, just pile it full of low information voters. And so, consequently, I'm sure some of you are going to ask where you get that. Well, there it is. There's the Texian store. All you got to do is go to store.tnm.me, and there is the shirt, the one that I'm wearing right now. So go enjoy that, and feel free to upset other people, because look, let's be honest. If somebody's going to be upset by what this says, then they might be part of the problem, right? Just going to go out on a limb here and say that they might actually be a part of the problem. All right. So, yeah, and when I came in here, Kara's like, you really shouldn't wear a suit coat with us. Like, well, first off, I wear a suit coat just about everywhere. I mean, obviously not in the shower, because that would be ridiculous, but everywhere. But the other part is it's practical, right? I know. I mean, I understand, but it's practical because I have nowhere else to clip the mic. I can't really clip it on this T-shirt. And let's be honest, if I wore this T-shirt and a tie with it, it would look really ridiculous, right? Just the T-shirt. So that didn't happen. So I'm wearing the jacket because the microphone is right here, and I had no other way to clip it. Okay, yeah, and I can see a lot of you guys sounding off in the chat. Man, there's a lot going on over here. So let me tell you what. Let's do this. Yeah, let's do this. Oh, by the way, you guys like the Texian partisan mug? Yeah, that's pretty snazzy too. That's also in the Texian store, store.tnm.me. All right, let's go to email first, and let's start taking questions, because there is a pile of them, and I got to tell you, some of you got your questions in like on the 11th, and I got to tell you, you guys wanted to be teachers' pets getting in so early. So let's go ahead and take this one. So Chris sent this one in, and he says, what is your response to the president of the Mexican Senate's comment regarding rebuilding the wall according to their 1830 map? So if you don't know what Chris is talking about, there was some back and forth, over all these ICE raids, and the president of the Mexican Senate essentially said, yeah, we'll build a wall. We'll build it back to the 1830 map, AKA their Reconquista nonsense. And so Chris wants to know what my response is, and my response is really twofold. Number one, that's never going to happen. That's a practical response, right? I mean, he's just being ridiculous. But he might ought to worry a little bit more about keeping Mexico together, because they seem to have forgotten. I mean, he's in the Mexican Senate. It's the United States of Mexico, and you have active secession and independence movements in Mexican states right now. Nuevo Leon is headed for an independence referendum in the very near future. They are probably the closest to making it happen. So rather than worrying about maybe adding more territory that they are in no way capable of taking care of, I mean, let's be honest, they can't take care of what they got. They might ought to be worried about doing something to maintain the states that are ready to spin out of there because of the corruption in Mexico City by the Mexican federal government. My second response is if they ever do get their act together and decide to do that, I will definitely, very much like my hat that says make Istanbul Constantinople again, I would be more than happy to wear a hat that says make Mexico Spain again. Spain would probably be much better neighbors to our south than the Mexican federal government. So, I mean, how far back do you want to take it, right? How far back do you want to go? Silliness. I mean, let us not forget that they pretty much lost a war and lost everything. And not only was the United States government gracious enough to essentially give them all of it back or most of it back, but what remained in the hands of the United States, the government paid for. And let us not forget that Mexico was a bad neighbor then too. So much so that the Texans, when they went in the Mexican-American War, they were still shouting, "Remember the Alamo and remember Goliad," and they were so hardcore. The Mexican government and the Mexican military referred to them as Los Diablos Tejanos, right? So they don't want to unleash that side of Texas again. Thank you for the question, Chris. Thank you very much. Okay, so here's this question came in, and oddly enough, I answered it offline. This is from Melinda, excuse me. That's how it was in the name. Anyway, Melinda asked if you could explain how the U.S. House would be after Texas independence, less seats or the same amount, an explainer of how the Electoral College numbers evolved. And so because of that, essentially the question is, how would Texas withdrawing from the Union affect the makeup of Congress and the Electoral College? And I went ahead and responded back because we actually already have that. There is a full episode of the Texas News Podcast right on our YouTube channel. If you're following the Texas News Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, there is an episode that specifically deals with that deals with what the Electoral College, what the impact would be on the Electoral College. And primarily, and I'm not going to recap the video, I'm just going to encourage you guys to go watch it. But really and truly, the reason that it came about was a lot of these people very concerned, that objection about, it would the United States would go full on Marxist and, without Texas electoral votes and on and on. And it just it essentially that question explains that to many people, the Electoral College is still somewhat of a mystery, right? They don't really understand what it does, how it works. They don't understand congressional apportionment, all that sort of thing. So it served as a great way to kind of educate on those topics, but also bat down this crazy objection. Okay, look, first and foremost, the federal system's going to wind up full on Marxist and Maoist anyway. I mean, if it can even stay together, right? I think there's a big question about whether or not the United States of America as an actual entity, a political and economic entity, is going to survive very much longer. But that being said, the outcome, and I'm not going to spoil it too much, but the outcome, that episode literally takes Texas out of the equation and reapportions how it's all supposed to be reapportioned and shows what the impact would have been on the previous elections, what those outcomes would have been in the Electoral College. And it was, I think for a lot of people, it was very eye-opening. So I'm going to encourage you guys to go check that out. I already sent the link to Melinda because she sent the question in. Thank you for that, by the way. But definitely go back and check out some of the older episodes of the Texas News Podcast. And you'll find answers to questions like that. We do some dives into some educational stuff on there on occasion. All right, so let's get over here to the chat. Let's deal with some of these. Hey, right out of the gate, Stacy, thank you so much for becoming a channel member. This is a great reminder. Stacy is going to be leading the Alamo Memorial March on Saturday. For those of you who don't know, the second Saturday of every month for, 12, 13 years now? So literally the second Saturday of every single solitary month for somewhere between 12 and 13 years, the Texas Nationalist movement goes and lays a wreath at the door of the Alamo Chapel to memorialize, to remember the Alamo defenders. And it's solemn. It's not a demonstration. They quietly march, they place it, finish around, boom, it's done. It's ceremonial, right? But it's our tribute to those who gave their lives at the Alamo. And so we've done it every second Saturday, every single time during COVID. when everything was supposedly locked down in rain and unbearable heat. I mean, just in any and all circumstances. And in doing so, we've developed a really good relationship with the people who run the Alamo. That was not always so in the early days. We were definitely not on the same page early on, but they always, even then, respected what we did, except for that one time where the guy had to call and beg for mercy for us to tell people to peel off the phones. But we do that not to make some political show, not to go out there and thump our chest and say how cool we are. We do it because we honor the legacy and the sacrifice of the Alamo defenders, the second Saturday of every month. Think about that. Think about how somebody do the math and get back to me. Right? What does that look like? We know that 12 years be 144 wreaths, right? So we're north of 144 wreaths that we have laid. Anyway, so this Saturday, Stacy had been in communication with the officials that run the Alamo. And what they did was they asked us to move the wreath laying from the evening, because we typically do it at dusk, ceremonial symbol. They asked if we would move it to the morning because they are anticipating tons of trouble. They know that we're there to memorialize. They don't want anything to disrupt what it is we're doing. Okay. So we did. And if you want to know more about that, you go to the events page, tnm.me/events, and you can find the Alamo March, and the details will be there on the page where you can find out what the time is, where they meet, and everything else. But anyone who would like to participate in the Alamo Memorial March, the second Saturday of every month, it is open and welcome to anyone, as long as you're there for the right reasons. This is not a protest. Do not show up thinking you're going to raise a little hell. You're there to be respectful and to place a wreath and memorialize people who gave their lives, and to leave a legacy that we hope inspires us and moves us toward independence. And so definitely get plugged into that. But anyway, thank you, Stacy, for becoming a channel member. It is greatly appreciated. And I'm sure Stacy would be, go ye therefore and do likewise to the rest of you. Go do a channel member. It's like $3, right? So go knock it out. Knock them out, champs. Okay. Let's get to another one. Yeah, guys, drop your questions in the chat, okay? And we'll get to it. So this is from John. John says, I'm surprised Cal-Exit hasn't gotten their petition signatures yet with all the fuss Newsom's making over federal action in California. It's an interesting conversation. So there is, now, I could talk about this a lot, but John, thank you for hitting this topic, because I think it's important for us as Texiteers to kind of take a step back and look at and sort of examine this situation in California right now. Now, Newsom has affected, so there's no way I can go through all this, but if you've been keeping up with the news, you know that ICE raids touched off rioters in Los Angeles, agitated by Antifa types, paid for by George Soros types. That's that whole story. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but that induced Gavin Newsom, governor of California, to essentially assert states' rights to try to make the claim. And so he was talking in language that sounded a lot like he wanted California, or was willing to see California break away from the U.S. Now, I want you to remember that these are the exact same people that are cheering this on, that are amazed by it. And I don't mean the Cal-Exit people. I mean sort of all these bystanders, the progressive media, all this kind of nonsense. The people that are cheering this on are the same ones who wanted Biden to go in and have a shooting war when Abbott decided to do some things on the border and when the federal government wouldn't, or talk about launching Hellfire missiles at Texas supporters, aka State Representative Gene Wu making statements to that effect on social media. Just hypocrisy, just blatant hypocrisy, so those same people that are perfectly willing to talk about, well, Texas can't leave, or, the military will come in and, they channel their inner Lincoln. Well, when Donald Trump starts acting like Abraham Lincoln and basically saying, look, I'll send in the Marines, which is a very Lincolnian move. Don't get me started on that. That's a whole podcast episode we could talk about. But when he does something that is very Lincolnian, they lose their minds. I mean, watching the Lincoln Project, which you guys, if you don't know who those guys are, they're horrible people. But watching the Lincoln Project send angry tweets at Donald Trump for doing exactly things like Abraham Lincoln would do is pretty rich, right? And all I am is over here thinking, I just want Texas to be independent so we don't have to deal with this nonsense anymore, right? We don't have to deal with this kind of craziness. If we want to, if we got people that are coming in saying they're going to burn down the Alamo, we have laws. And if you've seen the pictures from the Alamo last night with the DPS and National Guard, everybody there, super impressive. Look, I mean, I can't fault the response at all. It was a heck of a wall. I mean, it was incredible, right? And so kudos to, everyone involved in securing the Alamo last night. But my point here is I want to get back to what John was talking about. For those who don't know, I actually interviewed Marcus Ruiz-Evans, who's the president of the Cal Exit movement, on the Texas News podcast. We've talked about it on here before. And, they've got a petition going to essentially put an independence question on their ballot. Now, it'd be a little kind of less cut and dried like ours or the Quebec question or the Scottish question. It kind of kicks off their question is to get a process because they have citizen initiative there. But the challenge is the process, right? So if you're watching the counter on their website, that number is not actually the number. They don't have a good way to live update that counter. So they have to go in and do periodic updates. But I can tell you that I have communicated with their team over there, and they're doing gangbusters. I mean, they're doing great. Now, what effect that has on the petition, I don't know, because I don't dive off into that. That's family business for them. But they are very enthusiastic. And so, I mean, obviously it's had a tremendous impact on their movement. And look, if California wants to govern itself a certain way, let it do that. It can do that outside the confines of the federal system. Very much like Texans want to govern ourselves a certain way. And I can tell you that now we've got a situation where the Trump administration has effectively said, look, I'm willing to grant amnesty to certain classes of illegal aliens by executive order. I think a lot of people are looking at this and going, wait a minute, this is not this is not what we bought. This is not what we were expecting. And so it's I got to tell you, it's I have a lot of thoughts about this. We don't have all the time in the world to go through it. But I would just encourage you to go back and watch some of the episodes where I talked about the not just of Late Night Coffee Talk, but of the Texas News podcast or anything we've written. I will tell you at a very personal level, right after the election, someone asked me about, do you feel like we're, moving away from this idea that the United States might erupt into a civil war? And that was based off poll numbers, right? That's not, we're out here advocating for that. That's just polling. You had 40 some odd percent of Americans in the run up to the November election predicting that the United States would be in a civil war within a decade. Okay. So some people said, well, do you feel like there's a reprieve? Now there's been a little bit of a swing of the pendulum, and to a certain extent for us here in the Texas movement, we got a little bit of a breather, gave us a little more runway to get to where we need to be. But I'm going to tell you, as I have said many times since, is that we are inching ever closer toward that, toward a civil war, toward civil unrest, toward all these things. And people may say, well, that's just doom and gloom. And that's not. That's just one of the things that's made, going out there and fighting for Texas independence so urgent for me, because I want to spare Texas from having to be a part of whatever that is going to look like. Because if what you've seen in LA is just a little taste. Remember the summer of love back during COVID when you could protest without a mask, right? The government said, wear a mask. And the protesters said, no, we're going to go out here and set things on fire because apparently fire kills germs, right? I mean, I guess that was their rationale. But they go set the cities on fire. They go riot, they go loot, they go do all these crazy things. And, they're agitated, they're ready to go do these things. And I still believe, I have not seen any relief in the political tensions that you see ahead of civil wars. I just haven't seen it. So I want Texas to be out of this so we don't have to deal with this kind of nonsense. John, the answer to your question was in there somewhere, but thank you for giving me the airspace to have that conversation. Okay. All right. Debbie says, "Will the National Guard allow y'all to lay the wreath?" Yeah, that's done. Stacey's already communicated with the Alamo officials. They've moved the time to. They've got everything is arranged, right? So laying the wreath is not going to be a problem. It's not going to be a problem at all. So just go to tnm.me/events, find the Alamo March, and there you'll see all the updated details. But yeah, they were happy. It's gone from they really did not understand what it was that we were about, but watching the dedication of volunteers, sometimes when Chris Jacko was captain of the Alamo Guards, what we call them, the people who kind of headed up, and then when Carl was, they might be the only ones who showed up. Some people, that even lived in the county wouldn't even come down there to march with them. But hell or high water, for over 12 years, the second Saturday of the month, the TNM lays that wreath. It happens. It kicks off with a little bit of ceremony, then a very slow, silent march, and then the laying of the wreath, a moment of silence, and then we leave there to go carry out the vision that those people gave their lives for. So I think once the people at the Alamo understood that we were there for the right reasons, it's not a political spectacle for us. We don't use the Alamo as a prop, and there are people that do. We don't use the Alamo as a prop. We honor the legacy of the Alamo defenders every single solitary day in our lives. And the second Saturday of every month is when we choose to go and lay that wreath at that place to honor them. But really honoring their legacy is something we do every single solitary day, that we go and work to perpetuate the values and the vision and the worldview that they gave their lives for in 1836. So thanks for that, Debbie. All right, let's get over here to the emails. Okay, this is from Sam. Sam asks, hang on. I'm okay now. Sam asks, what is the planned currency if Texas gains independence? If it isn't the U.S. dollar, then what's it based on? Well, Sam, it's very, very good of you to ask that question. And I chuckle a bit solely because that's actually answered on the website, texitnow.org, right, which has the full-blown list, like the 100 most asked questions about the Texit process and the answers to those. And there is a discussion about currency. Now, the reason I chuckle, though, is not because it's there. It's because, Sam, I got great news for you. There's a bill sitting on Governor Abbott's desk right now that if he signs it, Texas has the ability to develop its own currency based on and backed by precious metals. And it's sitting there waiting for his signature. And the banking lobby is in his ear really hard against it. And there's some concern that he might actually veto the thing. So House Bill 1056 needs Greg Abbott's signature. And if he vetoes it, he needs to pay a price at the ballot box, right? I mean, that's just the way that it's got to be. But we're always, after Texas got its own gold depository, the Texas Bullion Depository, once that was done, we've always been about from that moment on, about this far away from being able to float our own currency. House Bill 1056 sets up that remaining bit of infrastructure necessary to do so, but we have everything we need here to do that. So, what is the planned currency? It's a great question. A question that is about to be answered with the signature of the governor on House Bill 1056. But understand that sets up a currency effectively for Texans to use that's based off of precious metals. And that's kind of a huge thing. Will that ultimately be the currency of an independent Texas? It might be one of many used by Texas. Texas will have, I'm sure, an official currency after independence because that's kind of the way that it works. But there's always that transition period, and you can always swap currency for another, one currency for another. You do that all the time on international exchange markets. So, good news, Sam, is you gave me an opportunity to remind everyone that House Bill 1056 is still sitting on the governor's desk waiting for his signature. So I would encourage all of you guys to get on the web, look up Greg Abbott's number. It's there. Call, tell him, put his signature on House Bill 1056. Texas needs its own currency sooner rather than later. All right. Let's see what we got over here. Hey, Netgear, I already thought you were, by the way, thank you, Netgear. I thought you were already a channel member, but, maybe you upgraded, maybe you did something else, but thank you for doing that. And it's really, really, really appreciated. So thank you so much. Okay. Let us get down to it. Okay, here we go. Here's a message from Mama J Enterprises saying, thank you, Ron. This is to you, Ron Raffoon. Thank you. I will continue the membership after the free month. That is really, really great. Thank you for doing that, Ron. Hey, and if you're just joining us late, what we're talking about is YouTube channel memberships. You can do that. Helps us continue to produce content and continue to do things like we're doing here. And this is the place where you can do it. Just go to our YouTube channel. You see where that arrow is? Mine says see perks because I'm already a member. But there, if you want to become a channel member, boom, you can click that button and make it happen. Okay, let's get to some more questions. Let's go to email. Man, we're already at the midway point. Wow. This is flown. Okay, here we go. This is Christopher. He says, hey. So what year is Texas going to tell the government that we as a state want to leave the union and become independent again? Okay, so that is let me just translate. I believe that's one of the questions that that asks, when is this going to happen? And I will tell you that I did an interview for a podcast. Gosh, I guess it wasn't Tuesday. Yeah, it was Tuesday morning recorded. It'll drop in the next week or two. I was interviewed on somebody else's podcast, and we talked about this very thing because, I get asked this a lot. And I think, as I told them on the podcast, that the thing to understand is that Article 1, Section 2 says all political power is inherent in the people, right? And so it's not what I decide, it's ultimately what the people decide. And it's not just whether Texas becomes independent or not, it's also when, right? So we know that the support trajectory trends upward. We know that as of right now, support for Texas independence is higher than it was in Scotland before the Scottish independence referendum, higher than it was in Catalonia before the Catalan referendum, higher than it was for the UK to withdraw from the European Union before the Brexit vote. The support for this is here, at least in the terms of people that will put their name on the line, which is dotted, okay? But I want to take you back to the Survey USA poll from 2022, that summer. And what was interesting about that poll was it's 60% of voters overall, 66% of likely voters said that they would vote yes. But there was another question in there that everybody seemed to gloss over, and it is, if there was a movement that was advocating for this, would you donate to help make it happen? And the respondents were like, I think it was like 20 something percent, like 22%, something along those lines. So, there is always this correlation between what people say they want versus what they are willing to give money to make happen. Okay. And if you think that this is me using this as an excuse to talk about, we need you to join or donate to the TNM, you're only partially right. But I want to put it to you in terms that make a lot more sense. If you go look at the political outcomes in the last election that produced this last legislative session that we got, that everyone for the most part is complaining about, understand that but for money, you would not have had any hope whatsoever. So many challengers are outspent. They're just buried by a tsunami of propaganda that is paid for by lobbyists and PACs that support and prop up the establishment. And so you have a lot of people, I was one of them, not last cycle, but 2 cycles back, that say, hey, you need to go run because you represent our values. And it's like, okay, so I'm hearing from all these people. They say they want you to run. But then when it's time to really show the support, right? We always, the vote is the default position, right? If you want something like that, getting that vote is the default position. It's literally the least thing you can do is go vote for somebody. But it's all those other things that lead up to it that really make the difference, right? And so, I'm getting there, I promise. But this is where the disconnect is from people on our side of the equation versus the establishment, is that we're all up against it. I mean, inflation has hit us all, the federal monetary system, the economy, everything else. But on a personal level, if we do not fund candidates, challengers, causes to go out in an organized way and effectively represent us, then basically we're just an old man shaking our fist at the sky, right? I mean, that's it. And, it's like the old saying, stop staring at the steps and start stepping up the stairs. It's that way. So there is this really a fundamental disconnect between what people say they want and what they're willing to invest to make that happen. It's a tale as old as mankind itself, right? But I'm reminded of the scripture that says, wherever your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so you can sort of reverse engineer that and go, well, if someone doesn't put their treasure into something, then that's probably not where their heart is. And that's why, when you have figures like that Survey USA poll, they always, for me, it's great news. 60% of all voters, 66% of likely voters would vote yes. That is great news. That's the greatest news, right? That's so fantastic news. But to see that only 20 some odd percent would even give a cent to help make it happen. I mean, that means that, 70, let's just say it was 25%. I think it was like 22%. I have to go back and forth, but let's just spot on point, say it was 25%, right? So that means 75% would vote for it, but would not part with a single solitary penny to help make it happen. And that, my friends, is why this takes so long. So you see, as I explained in that interview, if it were up to me, this would have been done August 25th, 1996, literally 24 hours after I crossed the proverbial line in the sand. It would have been done, but it's not up to me. All political power is inherent in the people. And so it's not just the question of whether Texas is in or Texas is out. but how quickly we get there. The support is sort of there, right? We know that if it goes to a vote, it wins, but it's all of the support that needs to happen in the run up to it to even give it a possibility to be on the ballot. And that's going to be the key. So my answer to you, Christopher, is simply this. You want to know what year do you want it to happen? When do you want it to happen? That is also a question for the people. And it will only happen when the support is not just, yes, I will vote for it, but when the significant amount of support raises up to say, I will help make it happen. That's the reality of it. Anything else is a wish or a dream. Okay. Anyway, thank you for that question, Christopher. Let's get back over here to chat. I think there's probably some things I need to see over here. Yes, indeed. Wow. Okay, let's get down to it. Wow. Okay, this is a fun one. Everett wants to know and by the way, thank you for the super chat, sir. Everett wants to know, what are your thoughts about SB3? My thoughts, and I can't remember if we talked about this last week or not, but I think it was, regardless of where your feelings are about the issue of cannabis and THC, that's not our wheelhouse, right? But the political aspects and implications of it, and sort of how it came about and how it plays out from here, that's definitely in our wheelhouse. And I'm going to tell you, I think Dan Patrick made a massive, massive mistake pushing that issue. There are a lot of there are going to be people that are going to be lined up on both sides of that issue. Not for us, right? Not for us to jump in the middle of. Our people can have their individual, but from an organizational standpoint, it's really got nothing to do with us. But those political implications, Dan Patrick is getting pushback that he is not used to. And as lieutenant governor, this bill's going in front of Greg Abbott. Odds are Greg Abbott will sign it, simply because there's discussion that it was John Now, which that's a whole other conversation that we could have, that in the liquor lobby and the alcohol lobby that were really pushing for SB3. And so consequently, what happened was that, that's where that was the origination point of it, is what a lot of people are saying. There was a big push by the alcohol lobby, pushing Dan Patrick and these guys to get it done. And then next thing it's got to go to Abbott's desk. Well, who is, handling on the finance committee or treasurer for Greg Abbott? It's John Now. I think he's Silver Eagle Distributors. So, odds are he will, because if he vetoes it, it becomes an absolute bloody nose on Dan Patrick, because he was so forceful. He's throwing bags of, cannabis snacks at reporters. He went so hard in the paint on this issue that if Abbott vetoes it, it obliterates Dan Patrick. It hurts him to the point that I don't know that he will continue. He may decide he wants to retire instead of run. If Abbott signs it, the blowback becomes even greater, I think, because it's a super divisive issue. I think the blowback becomes greater and gets spread across top of the ticket Republicans. So I don't know how it's going to play out, but it definitely, you take that particular issue, you take the school choice issue, those two, you take the lack of real property tax reform and relief. They're going to tell us the same crap they always do. We gave you all these property tax breaks and everything else, and everybody's going to buy this crap until they get their property tax bills, and everybody's property taxes are going to increase where most people's are, and they're going to realize they're going to be lied to, and then they'll quickly forget in the next session, and then whatever. But you take the property tax thing, you take SB3, you take school choice issue, you take those and realize how much that divided up the base that these guys absolutely need, and you throw in with that all of these shuffles politically, right? Paxton running for Senate, Mays Middleton coming out of the Senate to go run for AG. That's going to be a crowded race right now because Aaron Wright came in from D.C. to go run back to Texas to run for that seat, and there may be more challengers there. You got Glenn Hager leaving the comptroller's office to go be the chancellor at Texas A&M, and you already got Christy Craddock and Don Huffines running for comptroller. You may still see shakeups. You've got Tony Tinderholt retiring out of the Texas House. You've got Steve Toth allegedly going to announce that he's making a run against Dan Crenshaw. So there is all this movement that's taking place in Texas politics and an unusual amount at the top. So will we see Dan Patrick make it all the way to the primaries and file, or will he decide to retire out and name an heir apparent? What's going to happen with Abbott? Is he going to go ahead and run? Is he going to decide that this is his last term and retire out? Is he going to run and then try to run for president again in the next cycle? Who knows? Everything is in flux, and SB3 is going to play I think a pretty outsized role in all of that electoral and political chaos. So Everett, thank you so much for asking my thoughts on that. Okay, let's get up here and see what we have. Rhonda says, will Texit be non-interventionist in foreign wars? Well, Texit is a process. Texit is not a thing or an act. Texit is a process of making Texas independent, right? The path, Texit is the process between status quo and full political, cultural, and economic independence. And so your question is, I think you're asking, will Texas, after independence, be non-interventionists in foreign wars? And I think Texans have spoken pretty loudly about that. They're not in favor of going out there and getting in other people's business because we don't want people in our business. But ultimately, that will be decided by the people of Texas, right? Here we go. This question is from Ed. Ed says, I'm all in for Texit. Thank you, sir. Since my wife and I rely on our Social Security income, what will happen to this if we are successful in leaving the USS Titanic? The single most asked question that we get is about Social Security, and that is why we have a full-on 10-minute video explaining what happens with Social Security post-Texit. It is included in the Texit book that you can see right there. It is also answered for free on texitnow.org, and we get into all the nuance and everything else. But the short answer is quite simple. So Social Security, federal pension benefit payments are not dependent upon your residence, right? So think about how many expats collect their Social Security checks but live outside of the country. The only thing that stops that is if you live in a country that has been placed under terrorist sanctions. So Iran, Syria, I think Cuba is on that list, Belarus, some places like that, North Korea, state sponsors of terrorism. So, it's a very short list, and that's only because of banking restrictions that are placed. So bottom line is, I would encourage you to go to texitnow.org, read that whole thing, or go here on the YouTube, right on our YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube, and find the one of the TNM, the Texit 101 videos. I think that's the category that they're in, and it answers the question about Social Security for you. So, Ed, thank you for your question. Okay, this is from, Justo. Okay. What makes us Texans think we could be any leaner with tax schemes when we can't even do away with property taxes for our seniors? The most conservative objective is to limit the size of government, and it only can be achieved by tightening the purse strings. Yeah, look, this plays in. Thanks for the question, because it's one we get a lot. Like, what makes us think we're going to be any better? And the first thing I would tell you is it's strategic, right? As long as we continue to be entangled by the federal system, it's going to make reforming our government here so much more difficult. And there was a stat that we ran several sessions back that showed that 47% of all legislation that was introduced, all the bills and everything, referenced something federal agency, federal law, federal court decision. So everything we do here in Texas is always going to be bounded by our relationship within the federal system. A good example of that is campaign finance, right? So think about how much money pours into Texas elections from outside of Texas. One penny is too much because it's not a campaign finance issue. It is a sovereignty issue. Only Texans should be deciding the outcomes of Texas elections. And instead, what you have is tons of money that flows in from out of state that effectively serves as propaganda. Well, all of that ceases upon independence. You know, you have politicians right now, they only go into office for the purpose of potentially going federal, and so they play to a federal crowd. Senator Brian Birdwell is one of the worst of these guys. He is so federal that he hates anything to do with Texas exerting its sovereignty in a real way, right? He's cool with symbolic gestures, but any real assertions of sovereignty, he's totally against it, right? I mean, he will be the fly in the ointment every single solitary time. And so, you know, how are we going to be in the league? Well, we got to have a chance first. And the only way that we get that chance is, number one, we've got to effectively flood the zone. We've got to get enough candidates and enough electeds in the legislature to get us legislation, get us bills, move us more structurally and operationally like an independent nation, but ultimately get us a referendum on independence that we will absolutely win if it goes on a ballot, and then have those same people affect that transition. We have to have our people there, our people representing us to do the things necessary for us to get out from under the federal government. And once you do that and you break the back of the political establishment here in Texas, they will never get another foothold because they are totally reliant on sucking off of that cancerous cell tumors that are, you know, wrapping their tendrils into our government. We have to cut that cancer out. And that starts by breaking the back of the political establishment right here in Texas. And that happens when we do what I said much earlier in this conversation. And that is, instead of just saying we want independence, enough of us do what it takes, the necessary things, or a little bit, because everyone can do something, do enough, do something at a great enough percentage to make it happen. That's how we win. So, you know, how do I think we can be any later? Because I can tell you, if Texans had their say right now, at least what we've seen in surveys, they don't want property taxes, but they have got representatives. They keep sending people to Austin that they are willing to let lie about doing something about property taxes. Right? There are the two most immoral taxes ever to be inflicted upon mankind are the income tax and the property tax. Right? I mean, they are immoral as you can possibly get. And the fact that the people of Texas continue to send representatives to Austin that essentially will tell you, well, we're cool with banning this one immoral tax, but this immoral tax, you know, all we can do is just sort of, you know, manage it. We'll maybe compress this here, but really what we're going to do is we're going to scapegoat the local appraisal district. So we'll cap your rate, but we'll let the appraisal district come in and tell you that your residence is now 10 times worth what it's really worth, right? What you could sell it for. I mean, it would be a whole other story as if the appraisal district had to cough up the money. If they came in and appraised your house for a certain amount of money and you went to them and said, hey, that's awesome. Really appreciate that. Now cut me a check. If you believe it's worth that much, then you pay that much and it's yours. Wouldn't that be lovely? Don't get me started. But I do have confidence, right? I do have confidence that Texas can and will do better because, in fact, we have done better than the federal system. Not as good as we would like, but there's a reason we're the 8th largest economy in the world. You know, I mean, we have done better. We just haven't done enough we have not done enough to satisfy what Texans say they really want. We can do better, and we will do better. All right, let's get over here to the chat. Okay, covered that one. Okay, Lee's asking, is political censorship constitutional. Are you talking about the censure, like the Rule 44 censures from the Republican Party of Texas? I don't know if you're talking about the censures or you're talking about censorship and it's just a misspell. I don't know. So just drop your question back in and we'll cycle through it if we got time. But I'd maybe like to tackle that one. Okay, Sir Johnson says, Alan West and Daniel Miller were not on the Texas ballot in my town. Why? Well, if you were waiting for the general election to vote for us, neither one of us were on the ballot that cycle because we didn't make it out of the primaries. You know, and there is kind of another thing. I had a conversation with someone just the other day who literally, you know, we were talking about sort of the things that we have heard at the polls and what we've heard people say. And this person was a former candidate for state representative in Texas. And we were talking about how people did not understand how the election system in Texas worked and what the primaries were. And so I'm not saying that's you, but what I'm saying is if you were looking for us on the general election ballot, we did not survive the primaries, and we likely did not survive the primaries because there are a lot of people who don't understand what those are. Simple as that. Okay, let's get in here. Okay, let's get to see where we are. Okay, Rodney says, I saw in the news Alberta has enough signatures to kick off their independence movement. How does the state of their journey to independence compare to ours? Yeah, it's interesting. Background, if you don't know, Alberta, the province, is about with 1 foot out the door. I have not seen the news that they have acquired the signatures. Last I heard, they were still collecting. But maybe that news broke in the last 4 hours, but I have not seen it. But the bottom line is that, you know, Alberta's collecting the signatures. They radically reduced the number of signatures required to place the question on the ballot. And so, you know, we ask, how does the state of their journey to independence compare to ours? This goes to something that I say a lot about independence movements, which is, you know, to paraphrase Mark Twain, or to say what Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat, but history doesn't rhyme. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. I need more coffee, right? Here we go. Independence movements are like that as well. You know, so the process for Alberta is going to be very different than the process for Texas or the process for Scotland or the process for New Hampshire. Just by virtue of the different political systems, right? So a couple of real interesting things. Alberta has a way to have a question on the ballot about their independence because Quebec had one before. Their relationship to the Canadian government is very different than our relationship to the U.S. federal government. They have the ability to collect those signatures and have a binding question because of the precedent set by the Quebecois, right? So there are lots of differences there. And some make their path easier. We've seen this time and time again. Some paths to independence are far easier than others. Theirs could be easy. You know, I'll give you another good example here in the U.S. Not this last session, but the two before. New Hampshire's bill for independence was debated on the floor of the House of Representatives there in New Hampshire. Okay, now here's the difference. Okay, New Hampshire is about the size of Harris County, right, from a population standpoint. They have a representative for, I think, one representative for every 3,000 or 4,000 citizens. And every bill that gets filed goes in front of a committee. And even if the committee recommends that it not pass, it still gets to go to the floor and make a decision. That's not how it works here, right? So there are these differences that are fundamental to it. So the state of their journey is, look, they have a path that is so clear and paved out and straight. To paraphrase, to quote George C. Scott in the movie Patton, it's, you know, they could go through this like crap through a goose, right? I mean, it could be like that. and they could get the job done. However, the challenge that they have got is they are not as well prepared for independence. So that post-vote gap is far wider than ours will be. For us, we have the referendum, we win. We have a very small gap to be fully politically, culturally, and economically independent. Very small gap. They've got a much wider gap. So their process is going to be a lot quicker on the front end and a lot slower on the back end, where ours is going to be a little slower on the front end, but it'll be super quick on the back end. It's just the difference. But thank you for your question, Ronnie. Good to see you again, buddy. Okay. Let's see. I know I'm over time, but let me try to get through these. Mark asks, he says, considering the questionable integrity of elections in Texas through the electronic voting machines and dirty voter rolls, what is the chance that the votes by the people on secession will have any integrity? Mark, that is a great question. And it's a great question because it's been one of the focuses. You know, there's always been pressure on the TNM to deliver on the referendum. And we want the referendum. I mean, there is a lot of external pressure on us to try to make this happen. Now, granted, reference those numbers I gave you earlier. 66% likely voters want it, but, you know, less than 25% will help make it happen, right? And with even a cent, okay? So understand that's the kind. There's a lot of pressure on us to get the referendum done, and very little out there that want to make it help really make it happen. But there has always been this discussion within the TNM, a big concern about election integrity. You know, we were talking about election integrity long before it became the topic of conversation among, you know, everybody else. And the reason being is, if this indeed is supposed to culminate in a referendum, then how do we ensure that we have a free and fair vote of the people of Texas? And let's be honest, the confidence has been, you know, significantly eroded. There are some things that are happening at a county level that may reinstitute some integrity, drag Texas into election integrity kicking and screaming, because I don't know that we're going to get it done from the Texas legislature, not with this crop of, you know, this island of misfit toys that we've got up there in Austin right now. But, you know, they fight election integrity. And I think you have to ask yourself, why would people that are establishment fight election integrity? Well, the same reason they fight transparency, right? Or they fight having a referendum on Texas. 66% of likely voters, 60% of voters overall is enough to overwhelm the algorithm, right? That's a whole other conversation. But the bottom line is, look, we're concerned about it too. This is one of the reasons that we have to do the things necessary to try to secure. And if we can't rely on them, we can't rely on the Texas government, if we can't replace enough of them to get actual election integrity, then I'm going to tell you the cost for us is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of about a minimum of probably 35 and maybe upwards of about 70,000 election integrity volunteers on the run up to the referendum vote, and during the referendum vote, and the days after when the counting takes place. And so that's the big problem, right? Is if we don't get it, if we don't get election integrity, and before we go into the referendum, then we have to be able to swarm it with enough trained volunteers and staff to be able to ensure the integrity of the election ourselves. There's trade-offs, right? You either take care of it now, or you take care of it later, or it doesn't get taken care of, right? And sometimes, as the old adage says, a stitch in time saves nine. Okay, guys, I am running out of time, so let me get over here and take any of these last ones. Michael says, has anyone else noticed the uptick of independence talk on social media? Yes, we have. At least I have. There is a lot of it, and I'm very thankful for it. Remember, the needle is moving in our direction. We have shifted the Overton window, and we've ensured that, you know, I would say that our people are not low information voters, right? All right, so let's get down to it. Okay. Okay, let's take this one real quick, guys. I'm out of time, so I'm gonna have to wrap up. But let me try to get lightning around some of these. Last often says, I'm new and did find an article yet regarding making a Texas constitution that is simplified so as to be more efficient to running a nation. Is an article available? It's so the question you're asking is really sort of based on a misunderstanding of the process, right? And so what you're talking about is essentially a post Texit activity that has to be that can be done by the people of Texas. But what you're talking about is actually mentioned. There's an article about it on texitnow.org. I think it's on Texian Partisan too. There's something about it in the book, but here's the short version of it. After the Texit referendum, there are four things that Texas has to deal with. There are constitutional issues, statutory issues, international covenants, treaties, and agreements, and finally, negotiated issues with the federal government. The first part of that is constitutional issues. Texas does not have to write a new constitution to make it effectively a national one, and for a lot of reasons that I cannot get into because I'm out of time. But that being said, what's important to understand about that is all of that can be handled. Any of those changes can be handled by amendment, and the perfect time to do that is when you have to make the constitutional changes to effectuate the outcome of the Texit referendum. And that's the best time to do it. And it prevents you from having to have a constitutional convention to write a document from scratch. But if the people of Texas want to do that, they can. But to shorten the process from being a state of the United States to being fully politically, cultural, and economically independent, your best, most efficient, and shortest course of action is by amendment. And there's precedent for wholesale changes in the Texas Constitution via amendment from the 1960s, the Deadwood Amendment. So that's a topic for another time. Maybe we need to do a podcast episode on that. But thank you so much for your question and for being a channel member. I noticed that just then. So thank you so much. Let me do this. I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge Everett and his $5 super chat again, although I'm not going to have a chance to get to the question. But he said, I read that Texas took its philosophy of liberty from John Locke. Would an independent Texas continue in the Locke tradition? I think Texas will continue in the Texas tradition of liberty, especially as envisioned by the founders of Texas. And I would say that we have a lot of people in Texas government right now that are definitely two paths diverged in the wood, where the founders and those that gave their lives at the Alamo, what we are seeing out of our elected representatives in Texas is not what they gave their lives for. It's not. And so I think you're going to see post-independence a hard shift back to that sort of Texas values, the liberty aspects of where Texas came from. I mean, Texans had a very hardcore specific viewpoint on what the role of government was and its relationship to the individual. And when Mexico decided that it did not want to adhere to that agreement, that arrangement, Texas and other states of Mexico, they all tried to bounce too. But Texas was actually the one that made it out the door. And I thank God for that every day. Okay, folks, my friends, that is a wrap. If I did not get to your question tonight, my sincere apologies. Maybe it will make an appearance as an article in Texian Partisan, as unanswered questions often do. But I want to thank you guys so much for being here with us on Late Night Coffee Talk tonight. This was a fun one. This was an absolute fun one. Hang on. Am I getting... Okay, good. Just making sure that I was not... Yeah. Okay. Making sure that I was not getting a production note in the middle. All right, good. So anyway, look, thank you so much. I want to remind you guys, if you are watching on YouTube, hey, become a channel member, right? Go hit that button right there. Become a channel member. Do it. All the cool kids are. And how do I know that? I know that because I want to thank these people, especially for becoming channel members here on our YouTube channel. Guys, y'all are helping absolutely make this happen. And, look, it's we do this as a way to thank and reward people that are helping us produce content. They help us produce video content. I mean, it's a whole thing. And these folks are doing it in this very specific way. And they're helping us advance the mission. I mean, and I know this because I see the statistics for our video content and our written content and things of that nature. So guys, you are helping more than you can even possibly realize. You're helping us get the word and the promise and the hope of Texas independence out to the masses. And I cannot thank you enough. Now, a reminder, look, if you are not even a registered supporter of the TNM, now is the time to go make that happen. Head over to tnm.me/vote and pledge your support today. It's super important you do that. Yeah, I mean, it's super important. We talked about it doesn't cost a thing. It's free. So, you can be that 60 or 66%, whatever it is, you can be that, so you can go vote, go pledge your vote and say, look, I will vote. So I'll do the minimum. Now, if you want to do more, you always have that opportunity. You can become a member by going to tnm.me/join, or you can go over and make a donation today. Go to donate.tnm.me, and here's the cool part about it. Every dollar of donation actually counts toward credit, membership credit. So if you go make a donation, it actually counts toward membership. And so you can make that happen as well. And that is, look, if you're not comfortable giving super chats on YouTube or whatever, I get that. Go over here to donate.tnm.me and do that. Additionally, look, if you register your support, you can download the TNM mobile app. Even with all the big tech censorship that's out there right now, that everybody says, well, Musk bought X and all this other nonsense. The bottom line is big tech censorship still exists, which is why our internal social network exists, TNM Social. And if you download the TNM app, you have an opportunity to bypass all of that nonsense and get our emails, get our notifications, get messages, and more importantly, connect with other supporters of Texas independence that love Texas as much as you. And so, friends, that is, as I said, a wrap. I did not even play the little clip about the gold. I mean, I just didn't. I totally forgot. Oh, yeah. And for those, yeah, don't forget, go to store.tnm.me and get your shirt. I mean, remember, I hope whoever sent in the nastygram is watching tonight or gets a clip of this because, I love this shirt. I'm loving it. This shirt is so much fun. And I wore it for you, even under a suit coat. So what if it looks weird? I'm still wearing it. And hopefully some of you do not get, hopefully you guys aren't offended. That person could be offended all they want to. But anyway, get that from the TNM store. Okay, well, that said, let's wrap this bad boy up. So I will leave you with the words I leave you with every time we're together. They're not my words. They're the words of Sam Houston when he said that Texas will again lift its head and stand among the nations. I believe that time is now, and the question is, will you stand with her? Good night, everyone.